Good morning. My name's Andrew Powell. I'm the Managing Director of Rimini Street for Asia Pacific. Thank you for joining us. And I'd also like to welcome Rob Pickering, the Head of IT of Open Universities Australia.
Open Universities Australia is an online marketplace that connects students and providers in the higher education space particularly. And so we have a lot more in common with businesses like iSelect, like Webjet, businesses like that, in that we are a marketplace business. And so for us, while we have some commonalities, and one of the areas in which we overlap is having a student management system because we need to hand our students off to our providers, actually we have very little in common outside of that. And our predominant route to market is via our digital marketplace. We paid Oracle somewhere north of $1 million for the 3 years, and we'd had about 20 service tickets logged in that time, of which Oracle had sold 2. So of the other 18, they knocked back to us because it was related to customizations, or we actually came up with a solution before they got back to us. And so we, for about $1 million, had gotten 2 tickets closed in that time, which is a pretty tough sell for me.
I just want to put the maintenance market into perspective for you. Oracle turns over, roughly speaking, about $30 billion a year, and half of that is maintenance. And the profit margin on maintenance is around that 93 to 94% mark. So this is a extremely lucrative piece of the IT market. When you procure license, and let's talk mainly about SAP and Oracle today. When you procure that license, you acquire a license agreement. And separate to that license agreement is a maintenance agreement. Now, they're presented to you at the same time, but they're actually 2 separate agreements. And that maintenance agreement, as you know, drives that invoice that you get every year, or in the case of Oracle, potentially a series of invoices you get every year for that 22%, or maybe a bit less, depending on who you are for your software maintenance. Okay, so you've all got your mind on that invoice. So organisations who choose to engage Rimini Street choose not to renew the maintenance with the vendor. That might be Oracle or SAP, for example. We also do DB2 and SQL. They choose not to renew their maintenance agreement with the vendor, and they take a maintenance agreement with Rimini Street. And they tend to do that for 3 reasons. There's a significant reduction in TCO, there's better service, better inclusions, and particularly at the moment, given the way the vendors are moving, pushing to cloud, pushing to replatforming, pushing to lock-in, and perhaps pushing you onto a platform that's not ready yet, but particularly because of the way the vendors are moving at the moment, it kind of makes sense strategically to take back control of your roadmap.
One of the big challenges I've got as part of the IT leadership team, or the IT leader, is that we've got to have a model in which we can continue to deliver innovation at the speed at which our peers in the marketplace expect us to be. So I don't consider innovation at the speed of a uni to be where I want to be at. I want to be innovating like an Amazon, like a eBay, like a Webjet, like a iSelect. And so having systems built to do that and having support to assist us with that is actually the key part that I need to make sure that I can deliver on our promises with our brands. Being able to do more with less and being able to fund innovation is a real key challenge for that. So we want to be an innovative business, but we've also got a finite budget amount. And we operate inside of similar capital governance schemes that a university does because of our ownership structure. And so being able to set our priorities to be innovative, but to fund that innovation through making sure we spend the rest of our budget in a way that makes sense to us is a real key challenge of ours, and one at which sets a number of our priorities through the organisation. We've got a high-end digital web presence. We've got a very expensive and well-formed CRM platform. But actually, underpinning that is probably what you consider to be legacy technology. And so the Gartner approach to bimodal IT is what we've been working through over the last little while to free up our ability to innovate on the edges, but to give us the certainty around our core student management systems, which is actually the thing that Rimini Street looks after for us. So being able to have that 2-speed delivery is super important to us as an organisation. And it's been a real focus of ours because we are a 24/7 digital web presence. And so if we have an underlying system that's out of operation, we have a tremendous problem for us.
Renewing your maintenance every year is something that everyone does every year, and I guess sometimes it's not even questioned because, well, we've paid it every year. Why shouldn't we pay it again? So, you proposed an alternative approach, a change to an organisation that you said might be a little bit conservative.
I know that for us wasn't necessarily strategically important. It was quite sizable, and so it kind of piqued my interest. And I just happened to be shortly thereafter at this event after I went through that process and ran into the Rimini Street guys and had a conversation about how that might work for us. And so after we did that and I sort of came up with the idea, I went back to my CFO and sort of kicked it around with him and said, hey, there's a possibility of some savings here. I'd really like to invest that in other places. What do you think about that? And he's like, well, I don't know, Oracle, do you really want to poke that bear? Do you really want to deal with that kind of maybe blowback in that space? And so I had a conversation with him initially, and I thought that was quite informative because I think it informed the way that I approached everything past there, which was talking about while there were some risks in necessarily changing, there were some risks in staying that I don't think that we'd really thought through adequately. And by thinking through them and putting some value to those, it was really easy to ascribe how you might then engage with stakeholders through the organisation to make sure it met their requirements. So when I was talking to our service delivery manager, whose focus is entirely on how do we get stuff fixed quickly or as quickly as possible, his great concern was that he had to go through a level 1, level 2 process with the support desk currently, and maybe we weren't getting the best of engineers in the first instance. We already had some internal capability, and so we still had to jump those hoops even though we had internal capability where we already triaged it, a bit of the Big Pond experience. If you're a Big Pond customer, regardless of if you're a network engineer, you still go through the level 1 help desk. We talked to him about how we could actually improve that. I talked to our CFO about how we could free up some funds for innovation on the basis that we were making some pretty material savings, not just in our yearly costs, but in our kind of ongoing deferral of potential upgrades that we might need to do. If we don't undertake a step like this, we might be in a situation where we're forced to upgrade on a timeline that doesn't suit us and the risks that would come with that as well. Not necessarily getting timely support on what's a very important system to us, although not strategic, and the fact that we are a heavily customised kind of installation as well. So unlike our student management system, for most student management systems, it's one uni only, one uni, one student management system. We've got 10 unis on our platform, so we are heavily customised. So often when we would have a problem, we'd get through to support, but they'd actually say, well, that's a customisation. We're not really going to help you with that, after we'd already jumped through all the steps of, going through first, second, and third level support. And so I think the one key thing that I'd say is having a defined engineer that knows your environment and that works for you is actually a real benefit and gives me a great deal of certainty around kind of knowing that the person isn't going to have to be inducted every time you speak to them on what you do, why you do it, why you're different to another campus user. You don't need to jump through kind of these, have you rebooted it? Have you done this? They're kind of, we're not seeing those sort of questions, which is helping us from a time to resolution perspective. And I think that's one thing that's not sold terribly well. I think that's actually one of the real benefits for us. And they're aligned to people in our team, so they know there's a relationship between them, so they know each other and they can build a relationship in a working basis. And that helps for my team as well to not feel like that guy's there to replace their role. He's there to help them so they can focus on innovation tasks. And so it made the transition process much more smooth. For us, I wanted to move them on to something that was more strategically important to us, like innovation around the perimeter, rather than have them focus on looking after the BAU support stuff. So I wanted to be able to keep the lights on, but I didn't want to have 4 or 5 people there to try and maintain the skills and experience we've got. I kind of got the best of, well, I've got an engineer that's familiar with us because Rimini Street allocate a primary and secondary engineer to us that I can call and who knows our environments and knows what we do and knows our customizations, but also someone that could say, well, what else is happening in the wider world that could help inform what you might do next. The sales and support organisations are pretty different anyway. And so if you've got a relationship with the sales team, that will generally continue because they're going to want to keep selling you stuff. And the support team are different. It's a great kind of, you get to understand what other customers are going through. And for us, it was quite seamless.